Have you ever loved someone who seemed warm one moment and distant the next? Someone who looked into your eyes like you were their entire world, and then, just when things started to feel deeper, they pulled away. It leaves you confused. It leaves you questioning yourself. You wonder if you loved too much, asked for too much, felt too much. But here's the truth that almost no one tells you. They are not running from love. They are running from a feeling that love forces them to experience. And until they feel that unpleasant feeling fully without escaping it, they cannot fall in love deeply, and they cannot commit. That feeling is vulnerability. Not the cute surface level kind, not the kind where someone shares their favorite childhood memory, the kind that makes their chest tighten, the kind that makes their stomach drop, the kind that whispers, "You could lose this, you could get hurt, you could need someone." For someone who has built their entire emotional survival around not needing anyone, that feeling is terrifying. When they start falling for you, something shifts inside them. At first, it feels good. They enjoy your presence. They feel seen. They feel understood. They may even move quickly in the beginning because connection feels exciting when it is still safe. But then something changes. The connection deepens. You start mattering. Your absence would hurt. Your disappointment would sting. Your rejection would shatter something inside them. And that is when the unpleasant feeling begins. It is the realization that they care. Caring means risk. Caring means dependency. Caring means that someone else now has the power to affect their emotional state. And for someone who has learned that emotional dependency equals danger, this feels like standing on the edge of a cliff. So they pull back, not because they don't feel anything, but because they feel too much. Many people misunderstand this. They assume distance means indifference. They assume detachment means lack of love. But often distance is a defense mechanism against the intensity of their own emotions. When love begins to activate vulnerability, it also activates old fears. Fears of being overwhelmed, fears of losing themselves, fears of being trapped, fears of being abandoned. To fall in love and commit, they must stay in that discomfort long enough for it to transform. They must feel the anxiety of caring without numbing it. They must tolerate the fear of losing control. They must sit with the realization that someone matters deeply to them. And that is not easy. The core wound behind this pattern often begins long before you ever entered their life. When emotional closeness in childhood felt inconsistent, overwhelming, or unsafe, the nervous system learned something powerful. Closeness equals pain. Maybe emotions were dismissed. Maybe independence was praised more than vulnerability. Maybe expressing needs led to rejection or criticism. Whatever the origin, the result is the same. They built an identity around self-sufficiency, around strength, around not relying on anyone. Independence became armor. So when love begins to dismantle that armor, it doesn't feel romantic, it feels threatening. Imagine someone who has spent their entire life convincing themselves they don't need anyone. They take pride in handling everything alone. They feel safe when they are in control. Then suddenly, they meet someone who makes them laugh differently, someone whose absence feels heavy, someone whose text message can shift their mood instantly. Now their emotional state is influenced by another person. That loss of control creates anxiety. Love introduces unpredictability. What if you leave? What if you change? What if they disappoint you? What if you see their flaws and decide they are not enough? All of these fears rise to the surface the deeper the connection becomes. And because they are uncomfortable with vulnerability, instead of leaning closer, they step back. From the outside, it looks cold. From the inside, it feels like self-protection. The unpleasant feeling they must experience is not just vulnerability, it is the loss of control that vulnerability brings. Control has always been their safety net. When they control the emotional distance, they feel secure. When they decide how close things get, they feel powerful. But love requires surrender, not complete surrender of identity, but surrender of emotional certainty. You cannot love someone deeply and remain fully guarded at the same time. Commitment requires saying, "I choose you," without knowing the future. For someone who fears unpredictability, that statement feels like jumping into water without knowing how deep it is. And then there is dependency. This is the part that shakes them the most. The moment they realize, "I would miss this person if they were gone," something inside them panics. Missing someone means needing them. Needing someone feels like weakness. It feels like exposure. It feels like giving someone leverage over their heart. So they try to convince themselves they don't care that much. They focus on your flaws. They create emotional distance. They get busy. They rationalize why the relationship might not work. All of these are strategies to reduce the intensity of that unpleasant feeling. Because if they can shrink their feelings, they can shrink the risk. But here's the paradox. The only way they can truly fall in love is by allowing that risk to exist. They must feel the fear of losing you. They must feel the discomfort of needing you. They must experience the anxiety of emotional closeness without escaping it. When they resist it, love cannot deepen. When they avoid it, commitment feels suffocating. But when they stay, when they let the fear move through them, instead of running from it, something changes. The discomfort starts to transform into desire. The fear of losing you becomes motivation to show up. The anxiety of vulnerability becomes intimacy. The realization that they need you becomes the foundation for partnership instead of panic. But this transformation only happens if they remain in contact with that unpleasant feeling. And this is where many relationships collapse. When you chase someone who is pulling away, you accidentally remove the very discomfort that could awaken them. When you over-reassure, over-pursue, over-give, you make it easy for them to avoid confronting their emotions. They never have to sit with the fear of losing you because you are always there, ready to close the distance. Without emotional stakes, there is no urgency. Without urgency, they stay comfortable in emotional half measures. The separation trigger is powerful because distance activates longing. When space appears, they feel something they cannot ignore. They check their phone more often, they replay conversations, they wonder what you are doing. That curiosity, that restlessness, that subtle ache, that is vulnerability surfacing. That is the unpleasant feeling rising into awareness. And if they allow themselves to feel it instead of distracting themselves, they begin to recognize the depth of their attachment. It is in the quiet moments that truth becomes undeniable, when they are alone and your absence feels loud, when they realize that their day feels incomplete without sharing it with you, when they notice that no one else quite fits the way you do. That awareness is uncomfortable, but it is also the doorway to commitment. Because love is not proven when everything feels easy. Love is proven when someone feels fear and chooses closeness anyway, when someone feels vulnerable and stays present, when someone feels the loss of control and decides that connection is worth it. If you are watching this and you have loved someone like this, I want you to understand something deeply. Their distance is not always a reflection of your worth. Often, it is a reflection of their internal battle, the battle between independence and intimacy, between control and surrender, between safety and connection. They must feel the unpleasant truth that love requires them to soften. They must feel the discomfort of emotional exposure. They must feel the risk of loss. Only then can commitment become real instead of theoretical. And here is the most important part. You cannot force someone to feel this. You cannot convince them into vulnerability. You cannot love them so perfectly that they bypass their fear. This is an internal process, a confrontation with their own defenses. Some will rise to meet it, some will retreat. But the ones who stay, the ones who allow themselves to feel that unpleasant tightening in their chest and still reach for your hand, those are the ones capable of real love, because they have faced the part of themselves that wanted to run and chose not to. So if you ever wondered why things felt intense right before they pulled away, it's because intensity means depth. Depth activates fear. Fear triggers avoidance, and avoidance is simply an attempt to escape vulnerability. But vulnerability is the price of admission to love. And until they are willing to pay that price, commitment will always feel just out of reach. But here's what most people never see. They think the one who pulls away is calm, unbothered, certain. They imagine that distance means clarity, that silence means peace. But what often happens behind closed doors is very different. They feel anxiety too. They just don't show it the way you do. When the connection starts to matter, their nervous system lights up. Not with butterflies, not with poetic romance, but with tension, with restlessness, with an internal voice asking questions they don't know how to answer. Why do I feel off today? Why am I thinking about this person so much? Why does their mood affect mine? That internal disruption feels foreign. And because it feels foreign, it feels unsafe. So they internalize it. They don't call their friends and analyze every text. They don't always journal about their fears. They distract. They work longer hours. They scroll mindlessly. They convince themselves they just need space. But what they are really trying to escape is the anxiety of attachment. Attachment means you can be hurt, and they have spent a lifetime believing that the safest way to live is to avoid needing anyone deeply enough to be hurt. Here's the paradox that changes everything. They cannot commit until they tolerate that anxiety instead of numbing it. When they feel that tightness in their chest and stay instead of withdrawing, something shifts. When they feel the urge to create distance and instead choose to lean in even slightly, they rewire their relationship with vulnerability. The unpleasant feeling doesn't disappear, it transforms. It becomes anticipation. It becomes longing. It becomes desire, but only if they let it breathe. And this is where emotional safety becomes critical. Emotional safety does not mean zero discomfort. It does not mean constant reassurance. It does not mean you bend yourself into a smaller version to avoid triggering their fear. Emotional safety means they trust that if they open up, they won't be shamed. It means they trust that if they hesitate, they won't be attacked. It means the space between you can hold tension without collapsing. A lot of people think the way to secure commitment is to eliminate all discomfort, to be easy, to never challenge, to never create waves. But real intimacy isn't built on comfort alone. It's built on the ability to move through discomfort without abandoning each other. When they realize you are not chasing them, something profound happens. The dynamic shifts. If they pull back and you immediately pursue, the pattern stays intact. They feel in control again. They know you're there. The risk decreases, the unpleasant feeling fades. But when they pull back and you hold your ground, calm, steady, not panicking, their nervous system experiences something new: uncertainty. And uncertainty awakens awareness. They start wondering if you are slipping away. They start noticing the silence. They start feeling the space. That space creates emotional contrast. Suddenly, your presence isn't guaranteed, and the possibility of losing you activates a deeper layer of feeling they have been suppressing. It's not about playing games. It's about allowing reality to be real. If you are always available, always overextending, always reassuring, they never have to confront the possibility of absence. But absence is what sharpens clarity. When they feel the potential loss, the heart gets louder. Jealousy can also surface here, not the toxic kind, but the natural kind that arises when something valuable feels threatened. When they imagine someone else stepping into the space they took for granted, something tightens inside them. That tightening is not weakness. It's attachment revealing itself. And attachment feels unpleasant because it means vulnerability has already happened. They may not say it. They may not even consciously admit it. But the moment they feel protective over the connection, the moment they feel that flicker of fear at the idea of you moving on, they are experiencing the very emotion they tried to avoid: emotional investment. This is the catalyst. But here's where many viewers struggle. You want comfort to create commitment. You want consistency to create devotion. You want reassurance to create stability. And while those things are important, they are not what makes someone confront their fear. What creates commitment in someone who avoids is emotional stakes. If there's nothing to lose, there's nothing to protect. If there's no risk, there's no urgency. Commitment requires the realization that this person matters enough to hurt if they're gone. That realization does not feel pleasant. It feels heavy. It feels exposing. It feels like standing in front of someone and silently admitting, "You could break my heart." That is terrifying for someone who built their identity on emotional self-protection. Eventually, every avoidant reaches a breaking point in a deep connection. It may not look dramatic from the outside. It might be a quiet evening, a missed call, a moment of unexpected jealousy, a sudden wave of missing you more than they expected. But internally, it feels like a crossroads. Run again, or stay. Running is familiar. Running restores control. Running numbs the anxiety. But staying requires courage. Staying requires them to sit with the unpleasant sensation that their heart is no longer fully guarded. In that moment, their mind will search for reasons to justify distance. They will magnify imperfections. They will question compatibility. They will wonder if something better exists. All of this is the ego trying to protect them from vulnerability. But if they pause, if they breathe through that discomfort instead of reacting to it, they might notice something deeper beneath the fear: desire. Not surface attraction, not convenience, but the deep desire to share life, to reach out, to be known, to not lose this connection. When fear and desire collide, one will win. If fear wins, they detach. If desire wins, they lean closer. And desire only wins when they allow themselves to fully feel what they are afraid of. The shift from fear to love does not happen because the fear disappears. It happens because they decide the connection is worth the fear. They realize that a life without risk might be safer, but it is also emptier. They start to see that independence without intimacy feels hollow. That control without closeness feels lonely. When that awareness hits, something softens. They may not transform overnight. They may still struggle. They may still hesitate, but the internal narrative changes. Instead of "I need space because this feels wrong," it becomes "this feels intense because it matters." That reframe is powerful. And if you are the person on the other side of this dynamic, there are things you must not do. Do not over-reassure to the point where you erase your own needs. Do not collapse your boundaries just to reduce their anxiety. Do not constantly prove your value in hopes they will finally see it. When you overextend, you unintentionally shield them from the very emotional consequences that create growth. You deserve someone who chooses you freely. You deserve someone who feels the discomfort of vulnerability and still says, "I want this." Pulling back, when done from self-respect and not manipulation, restores balance. It communicates that you are not desperate for connection, that you value yourself, that your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. This creates polarity, and polarity creates attraction, grounded in mutual respect. Absence clarifies feelings in a way presence sometimes cannot. When they sit in a quiet room and realize they miss your energy, your laughter, your support, that is not something you can manufacture with words. That realization must rise naturally, and it rises in space. If they never allow themselves to feel this unpleasant cocktail of vulnerability, fear, longing, and potential loss, they will repeat patterns endlessly. They will move from connection to connection, keeping everything just shallow enough to avoid emotional exposure. They may convince themselves they just haven't found the right person. But the truth is, they haven't faced themselves. And facing yourself is uncomfortable. It means admitting you are afraid. It means acknowledging you want love more than you want control. It means accepting that independence without connection is not strength, it is protection. Not everyone will choose that path. Some will stay guarded forever, but the ones who do choose it, the ones who sit in that burning discomfort and decide not to run, become capable of something profound. They become capable of real commitment. Not commitment born from pressure, not commitment born from fear of being alone, but commitment born from courage, from emotional maturity, from the decision to feel deeply instead of safely. And if you are listening to this, wondering whether someone will ever reach that point with you, remember this: you cannot drag someone into emotional readiness, but you can create an environment where growth is possible. You can embody steadiness, you can hold boundaries, you can love without abandoning yourself. The rest is their journey. Because at the end of the day, avoidants need to feel that unpleasant feeling, the vulnerability, the loss of control, the risk of losing you, not to suffer, but to awaken. That discomfort is not the enemy, it is the doorway. And only when they walk through it willingly can love truly begin. But here's the part that changes everything. Even when they start to awaken to their feelings, even when they realize they care more than they wanted to, there is still one final wall standing between them and commitment. The illusion of independence. For most of their life, independence has not just been a preference. It has been an identity. I'm fine on my own. I don't need anyone. I handle my own problems. These statements are not arrogance. They are survival strategies. They built their self-worth around self-reliance, around being the strong one, the unaffected one, the unbothered one. So when love makes them feel attached, when love makes them crave your presence, it threatens that identity. Because if they admit they need you, who are they then? That crack in identity is deeply unsettling. It feels like losing a part of themselves. It feels like weakness. It feels like stepping into unfamiliar territory where they are no longer fully self-contained, and the ego fights hard to preserve identity. It whispers, don't lose yourself, don't depend, don't become vulnerable. But here's the truth, they must confront. Needing someone does not erase independence. It expands it. Healthy interdependence is not the same as losing yourself. It is choosing connection while still standing in your own strength. But until they emotionally experience that truth, not just intellectually understand it, they will resist commitment. They must feel the crack in their "I don't need anyone" story. And that crack often appears when they realize something simple but terrifying. Life feels better with you in it. That realization sounds romantic, but for them it feels destabilizing because if life feels better with you, then life without you would feel worse. That is vulnerability. And vulnerability is the unpleasant feeling they must stop running from. There is also something most people never talk about. When someone has avoided deep attachment for years, they often carry quiet shame about their emotional limitations. They see other people commit, they see others build stable partnerships, and a small voice inside them wonders, why does this feel so hard for me? Instead of facing that shame, they protect against it by staying detached. Detachment becomes armor against inadequacy. But when they start to care deeply about you, that armor cracks. They begin to see their own patterns more clearly. They notice how they withdraw when things get intense. They notice how they minimize their feelings. They notice how they create distance when closeness feels overwhelming. And awareness is uncomfortable because awareness demands responsibility. If they recognize the pattern, they can no longer blame timing, circumstances, or compatibility. They must face the possibility that the barrier to love has been internal all along. That realization can either push them to grow or push them to run. This is the internal breaking point most people never witness. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is a quiet reckoning, a moment alone where they ask themselves, am I going to keep living like this? Or am I going to risk something real? When they imagine losing you for good, the emotional reaction is telling. If they feel relief, they were never truly invested. But if they feel a hollow ache, if they feel regret before anything has even ended, that ache is the unpleasant feeling demanding to be acknowledged. The fear of loss is a powerful teacher. Loss forces clarity. It strips away illusions. It reveals what truly matters. And when someone who avoids closeness feels the possibility of losing someone they deeply care about, it can shock them into emotional honesty. Suddenly, the small inconveniences don't matter. The minor flaws don't matter. The imagined perfect alternative doesn't feel as convincing. What matters is the connection, the shared memories, the way you understand them, the way you feel like home. But even then, they must make a choice. Fear will tell them to detach before it hurts more. Love will tell them to lean in before it's too late. And here's what leaning in looks like for someone like this. It is not grand gestures. It is not dramatic confessions. It is small, courageous acts. It is sending the message they were overthinking. It is initiating plans instead of waiting. It is expressing a need instead of suppressing it. It is saying, this scares me, but I don't want to lose this. Those moments may seem ordinary, but for them, they are monumental because they are choosing vulnerability over control. And that is how fear slowly transforms into desire. Desire grows when they realize the discomfort did not destroy them, when they open up and you don't weaponize it, when they admit they miss you and you don't mock it, when they express uncertainty and you respond with steadiness instead of pressure. Their nervous system begins to learn something new. Closeness does not equal danger. Safety is not the absence of intensity. It is the presence of respect. If you have ever loved someone like this, you know how exhausting it can feel. You oscillate between hope and doubt, between connection and confusion. You wonder if you should stay patient or walk away. And in those moments, it is important to remember something crucial. You cannot do their emotional work for them. You can inspire growth by modeling secure love. You can hold space. You can set boundaries, but you cannot force someone to feel ready. Growth happens when discomfort becomes unbearable to ignore. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow them to feel the full weight of potentially losing you. Not as punishment, but as reality. Because if they never experience the consequence of distance, they will never question it. If they never feel the silence echo back at them, they will never understand the value of your presence. This is why comfort alone does not create commitment. Comfort is soothing. It feels good. But commitment is forged in contrast. It is forged when someone sees what life looks like without you and realizes they don't want that version. It is forged when they understand that protecting themselves from vulnerability is costing them something meaningful. And here is the sobering truth. Some will never tolerate the unpleasant feeling long enough to transform it. Some will choose control over closeness every time. They will keep connections light. They will avoid depth. They will rationalize their solitude. They will convince themselves that wanting less is strength. But the ones who are capable of real love, the ones who eventually commit, are the ones who sit in the discomfort and don't numb it. The ones who feel the anxiety and don't let it dictate their actions. The ones who acknowledge, I am afraid, but I want this more than I want to hide. If you are waiting for someone to reach that place, watch their actions, not their words. Growth reveals itself in consistency, in effort, in emotional availability, increasing over time, not perfection, but progress. And as this chapter of the journey unfolds, there is one final truth you must hold on to for yourself. You deserve someone who is willing to feel for you, not someone who only feels when it is convenient, not someone who loves in theory but withdraws in reality. You deserve someone who experiences the unpleasant vulnerability of attachment and still chooses to stay present. Someone who recognizes that love requires courage. Someone who understands that commitment is not about eliminating fear, but moving forward despite it. Because in the end, love is not the absence of discomfort. It is the decision that the connection is worth the discomfort. And when someone who has spent their life avoiding vulnerability finally allows themselves to feel that tightness in their chest, that fear of losing you, that undeniable longing, and instead of running, they reach out, that is when you know they have stepped through the doorway. And they are no longer just protecting their heart. They are offering it. And when that happens, it doesn't look like a fairy tale. It looks quiet. It looks like someone who once hesitated, now choosing to stay in the conversation instead of shutting down. It looks like someone who once needed days of distance, now needing reassurance, but not disappearing. It looks like someone who once avoided labels, now initiating the conversation about the future. Because when an avoidant finally commits, it's not impulsive, it's earned. It's the result of internal battles you never saw, nights where they replayed your voice in their head, moments where they almost convinced themselves to walk away, but couldn't shake the feeling that losing you would hurt more than staying scared. Silent realizations that the life they built around emotional distance was starting to feel empty. Commitment for them is not about romance. It's about surrender. Not surrendering their identity, not surrendering their independence, but surrendering the illusion that they can experience deep love without risk. And that's the final unpleasant truth they must accept. Love will always carry risk. There is no version of real intimacy where you are fully protected. There is no guarantee someone won't disappoint you. There is no contract that promises forever without effort. To love is to step into uncertainty willingly. For someone who built their entire nervous system around avoiding uncertainty, this is the ultimate confrontation. And here's what most people misunderstand. They think once an avoidant commits, the fear disappears. It doesn't. The fear still whispers. It still tries to pull them toward distance during conflict. It still tempts them to shut down when emotions run high. But now something is stronger than the fear: attachment. Attachment that has been consciously chosen. And that changes everything. Because when someone chooses you while feeling afraid, that choice is intentional. It's not accidental chemistry. It's not convenience. It's courage. It's emotional growth in action. But this transformation only happens when they survive the unpleasant feelings instead of escaping them. When they feel jealousy and don't mask it with indifference. When they feel the urge to withdraw and instead communicate. When they feel overwhelmed and ask for reassurance instead of disappearing. These moments are not weakness. They are rewiring. And if you are the one loving someone like this, you need to understand something deeply. Your steadiness matters, not your perfection, not your constant availability, not your overgiving, your steadiness. When you respond to vulnerability with calm instead of chaos, you create safety. When you maintain boundaries instead of chasing, you create respect. When you value yourself enough to walk away from breadcrumbs, you create clarity. Because here's the truth that might be hard to hear. If someone never feels the real possibility of losing you, they may never fully confront their fear. Loss is not something you manufacture. It's something you allow to be possible by refusing to abandon yourself. You cannot beg someone into bravery. They must choose it. And sometimes that choice only happens when they realize you are not waiting forever. This is not about manipulation. It's about reality. Relationships are choices made daily. When someone believes you will tolerate endless emotional distance, there is no urgency to grow. But when they understand that love requires participation and that you will not stay in a one-sided dynamic, the stakes become real. And stakes awaken the heart. Now let's speak directly to the person watching this who feels exhausted. You love deeply, you were patient, you tried to understand their patterns, you made excuses for their distance because you saw their potential. And part of you wonders if you're asking for too much by wanting consistency. You're not. Wanting someone to show up emotionally is not needy, it's healthy. Wanting reassurance is not weakness, it's intimacy. Wanting commitment is not pressure, it's clarity. The unpleasant feeling they must experience is not your responsibility to carry for them. You are not meant to shrink your needs to make them comfortable. You are not meant to overfunction so they can underfunction. You are not meant to stay in limbo while they decide whether vulnerability is worth it. You are meant to be chosen by someone who is willing to feel. And here is the final emotional truth. Avoidants do not fall in love because someone loves them perfectly. They fall in love when they realize they cannot outrun their own feelings anymore. When the thought of losing you creates more pain than the fear of staying. When the loneliness of self-protection becomes heavier than the anxiety of intimacy. When independence without connection feels emptier than connection with risk. That is the shift. That is when commitment becomes possible. And when it does, it is deep. Because someone who had to fight themselves to love you will not take it lightly. Someone who had to dismantle years of emotional armor will not treat your heart casually. Someone who chose vulnerability over avoidance understands the weight of that decision. But if they never reach that point, if they continue to choose control over connection, then no amount of love from you will change it. And that realization, as painful as it is also freeing. Because it means your job is not to convince, it is to stand in your worth. It is to love fully without abandoning yourself. It is to allow someone to either rise to meet you or fall away. Love should not feel like constant guessing. It should feel like two people willing to face their fears together. So if you are in this dynamic right now, ask yourself this. Are they moving toward growth, even slowly? Are they staying present in discomfort instead of fleeing it? Are they choosing vulnerability more than avoidance over time? If the answer is yes, there is hope. If the answer is no, the most loving thing you can do for both of you is to stop shielding them from the consequences of emotional distance. Because the unpleasant feeling they need to experience is not cruelty. It is clarity. Clarity that you matter. Clarity that love requires courage. Clarity that running has a cost. And when they finally feel that cost deeply enough, when they realize that protecting their heart means losing something irreplaceable, that is when the walls begin to fall. That is when fear stops leading. That is when love becomes stronger than avoidance. And that is when commitment stops feeling like a trap and starts feeling like home.